Hi, I'm Martin Jarvis, and once again I want to welcome you to another perspective. Science and religion. Can the two ever meet? I believe they've already met. They just don't know, they don't recognize each other, okay? And as you go back in human history, there have been people of a sort on this planet for over 2 million years. And modern human relatives have been on this planet 200 to 300,000 years. And what's very interesting is that religion has only been around for about 6,000 years. So where was the religion? Where was God in the years prior to the last 6,000? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, because we really want to look at religion and science and find out what's true, what isn't, and where we are in this thing, okay? I guess we want to start with science because, we want to look at science, especially when we talk about science. We think about Galileo, or we think about Copernicus, and we think about a lot of those guys. And of course, recent history, kind of, Einstein, Bohr, and Oppenheimer, the atom bomb and all. But what I want to suggest is that science goes back way, way further than that. Science is about observing and making a hypothesis, trying to understand why, okay, until something comes along that adjusts that thinking or changes it altogether. And so I believe then that science has been around since the first human beings, just at a very elementary level, okay? Yeah. What is fire? What is water? This animal, how do I catch this animal? What can I use this animal for? And the elements, the air, the wind, the rain, the snow, whatever people were coming in contact with, life, trying to understand by observation and coming to a conclusion and figuring out how to best deal with what they're dealing with. And I want to, sometimes that might be a difficult concept to really embrace, but I want to say that, we look at a baby when an infant comes into the world, and it's just full of wonder and absorbing everything that it experiences. And then when they become to that toddler age where they can ask why and what and all these questions, they ask so many questions just trying to understand all the things that they're experiencing. That's science, on a very small level, okay? And so when we come into the 6,000 years from today, when the religions were beginning to form, and we recognize that human beings had been around for a long time prior, science has always been around. And religions, to me, then were a type of science. It was recognizing things. It was beginning to recognize the sun and beginning to see the planets and even nature and all the things that we experience, and even some of the tragedies and the diseases that we experienced. And religion then was a response to the observation. There must be God. There must be this entity that has expectations of us that we may or may not be living up to, and there are consequences for living up to or not living up to those expectations. And so then religion in itself was a science. Okay, because we'll find a lot of the scientists that began making discoveries and making theories, they came out of the church. Okay, they were religious folks. Okay, so it was like the religion was just a stepping stone in science, and it came to a point where the discoveries were beginning to refute some of the things that the religious folks had embraced, like the earth being the center of the universe, or everything revolving around the earth, because we were all that. And so the science continued and then began to refute some of the assumptions that were made by the religions. So we need to always maintain that, is that there's always been a connection between religion and science, because religion in its inception was itself science, an explanation of the observations and all, okay? And so now we are at a particular point in time where we have this quantum science going on. We have this understanding of things that we can't see, and looking at evidence and making conclusions and mathematical determinations and all. We have come up with a whole lot of things that are simply part of the science, part of the quantum science, the things that are so small that we can't see, okay? And so now we come to the point where the religion and sciences begin to bump heads. Now, I think it's very important to recognize that the religion has sort of evolved past the science stage and has really embraced the business and the power stages. Now, this has been going on since almost the beginning. So the religion was about, whether it was Judaism, whether it was Christianity, whether it was Islam, and maybe walking in a way that was honorable, that was had good intentions and all. But there came a point, men of power and business folks, looking to make that dollar, recognized how if you can control the people, you can coerce them into doing whatever it is you want them to do. And that's where we've come. We see that today, even in our religions today. I mean, look at the mega pastors flying around in jets, 1 and 2 jets, 50,000 square foot homes, and Rolls Royces and Bentleys and all this stuff. They've recognized this. And then you look at the Catholic Church and its hand that it's had in every indigenous land on this planet. They're one of the wealthiest, most successful business on earth right now. So the religion, I believe, was initiated in sort of a scientific stage, simply wondering and coming to conclusions and all. But it evolved into something different. It's no longer science. Now it's power. Now it's money-making enterprises. And so any refute then that religion would have against science wouldn't be for the pure sake of God, of recognizing God and honoring God and all, but it would be simply that the science would be challenging its hold, on the minds of the masses, okay? You even found that in biblical scripture where the Pharisees and these religious leaders were concerned about the power that was being challenged by this new sect of people that were following Christ. It was that money thing. It was the power. And that's what we have today. So I want to suggest then that those folks that are pure of heart, as pure as we can be as human beings and all, that are seeking truth, as we find in Scripture as well. Jesus said that the truth will make us free. Jesus said to seek and you will find, to ask and it will be answered, to knock and it will be opened unto you, okay? But see, the problem is when we come to a place in life where we stop seeking, we stop asking, and we stop knocking. And that's what we find with the scientists today, and that's what I want to say. They're a continuation of the religion, which was in itself science, because they haven't stopped. They haven't stopped the wonder. They haven't stopped looking and searching and seeking and knocking. And they're finding. They're receiving what that biblical verse was saying is they're knocking and it's being answered. They're asking and those questions are being answered. They're seeking and they're finding. And these things, these answers that they're receiving are being refuted by religious folks, okay? And what I want to consider today, and I want to suggest first of all that I'm not a religious person. I know I've been a staff pastor for over 20 plus years. I've functioned in ministry for 30. I've been doing things all in the community, all this stuff. But I don't really see myself as religious. I see it as a blessing that I was raised in church, so I got to learn all the stuff in a real good church. But then I see it also as a blessing that I went for the next decade after joining the military as an atheist. Because I got to reject all of the beliefs that I had bought into while still maintaining the knowledge of the religion. So when I had this epiphany when I was 28 years old, and I just turned 67 recently, when I was 28 years old, it was I recognized that, and I believed that there was something greater than me but without the religious baggage, okay? Because still the logic was, these religions were created by men, beginning about 6,000 years ago, and humanity has been here for 300,000 years, okay? So I made a determination to begin walking with my eyes open, and I was always a person that embraced science. Even as a kid, I loved the dinosaurs, I loved science, all that stuff, And I remember being at the university, at the local community college, and I was taking a biology class with my little sister. Now we were both raised in a religious environment, but at the time I was an atheist, and she wasn't, okay? And she was struggling because she didn't want to answer the questions on the biology test based on science and evolution and all that stuff. And she was really struggling with that. And I told her, look, believe what you wish to believe, but if you want to accomplish this degree, you need to answer those questions, based on what they're looking for, okay? I think that was a revelation to her, because she's a PhD today, She probably even forgot those conversations, But anyway, I went off on that rabbit trail and forgot where I was at. So science today, I believe, is a continuation of the original intent behind the religions, okay? And so we're scratching the surface, especially in this quantum physics thing, and we touched on this the last program. We talked about the entanglement theory, we talked about the uncertainty principle, where you can't know a thing until you see it. And was demonstrated by the analogy of Schrodinger's cat, where you have a box and you put some poison in there, there's a cat in there, the cat is both alive and dead, and pretty much every other possibility of in-betweenness, of the life and the death, and you don't know if the cat is alive or dead, because both cats are in there. All cats are in that box. That's what's called the superposition. And then when you open the box, then you see, okay, it's dead, okay, it's alive. And the theory is that the cat was both alive and dead at the same time, but once you open the box, all you have left is either a dead cat or a live cat, okay? That's when it changed, when the box opened. And that's kind of difficult to conceive, to believe, but that's the theory. And what's interesting is there's this thing called decoherence, which is why you don't have all the cats in the box when you open the box. It's that when the elements, when light, when particles and waves and all the things that exist touch this superposition, it becomes one. It becomes classical. It becomes what we can observe, okay? And that's very interesting. That's the whole point behind the value of a vacuum, in that a vacuum is able to remove or keep out of itself all kinds of distractions or elements and things. I mean, it's not totally free, but very free, the vacuum. And so once the vacuum exposes itself, or whatever it's protecting, to the elements, it becomes classical. It becomes that which we're used to. One thing, okay? And so that's the whole multiverse principle at all, except the multiverse concept is, rather than simply becoming the one thing, it actually branches off. So it's exposure then to elements, to particles, to waves, to all this stuff. It doesn't destroy it or restrict it down to one. It branches off. That's a theory, which they haven't proven yet. But anyway, what I want to suggest today, maybe from a trying to help the spiritual person conceive this concept, I think they're working together. As I've shared before, I believe since the religions were created by men, Okay, I still believe in all the religious texts, there are certain nuggets that are sprinkled throughout those texts. You know, I don't embrace any particular religious book as being the total, infallible, perfect word of God or Allah or Yahweh or Krishna or whatever. But I do believe that in all of the holy books, there'll be sprinkled nuggets that are very valuable and that point to truths, okay? And I believe, when I look at folks like Einstein, they talked about Einstein being, a thinker, an imaginer, and some of the things he couldn't really even figure out mathematically. Like the orbit of Mercury around the sun as it conflicted with Newton's theory. He had the idea, but he had to go hire a mathematician to figure out mathematically for him, and he turned out to be correct. But the point is, there are people that have gifts of certain imaginations. I believe that they can tap into the unknown, and they can begin to see what others don't see. And I think those are the people that have sprinkled throughout these religious texts. We have sprinkled throughout all of them certain nuggets. Like even in the Christian religion, but believing in a thing, this thing called faith. Believing, even though you don't see it. I think in Scripture it's called faith is the substance, the evidence of faith is the substance of things not seen. Imagine that. The substance of things not seen. That sounds a little quantum physical, if you ask me. Believing that you have something even though it's not there. Okay? And then when it finally arrives, that God is able to do something exceedingly abundantly more than you ever thought, or so even the thing that you were believing and you knew was there, when you looked at it, it was different than what you would imagine it to be, but were given the promise that it would be something either what you wanted or better. And so I'm just suggesting that these things go hand in hand, okay? Not the religion itself, but the nuggets within the religion, considering that the religion itself initially was science trying to understand. And so we can't, as spiritual people, reject science now because it might conflict with the religion, the ardent rules and practices and all these things that we have determined are gospel truth and all. But recognize that the science is continuing, and from my perspective then, what we are discovering in science ties into us as human beings, the spiritual side of us as human beings. And that's kind of deep-ish. And it is hard to conceive, But it's the way I think we have to logically look at this thing. Because again, what were we before the religions? What are we now? We are bodies, but these bodies are not us. We are invisible. We are the animated part of this body. And it has always been this way from the first human being. Okay? So what I'm suggesting is the animated part of you that is keeping this body moving and alive and doing things is not the body. When you see that body in the casket, that's not the individual. That's the body that was being animated by the individual who we really are, okay? And if that's the case, and it must be the case, because if you cut your arm off, you're still the same person. You're inside. You know when you dream, when your body is out, what's going on up in there. This is you. This is the invisible you. This is the animated part, which is actually you. So where do you go? Where do you go when you dream? That's interesting. But where do you go when you die? We are actually part of this thing that the scientists have been trying to study, trying to understand the universe. Understanding the waves and the particles and all these things that we're observing, the atoms in the universe. What I want to suggest is we are part of that. And I think from a scientific perspective, where we are failing is we're not really seeing ourselves. I saw a physicist the other day talking about how everything in the universe is really very, very small. Well, what's he comparing that to? He's comparing it to us and our existence. What I'm suggesting is when you consider the vastness of the universe, we are as small, okay? You've seen those pictures of the planet Earth taken from a traveling ship that we have sent, millions and millions of miles away. We are just a dot, a sparkle. And that is the planet we live on. So we are no larger than any of the elements and any of the particles and things that we've been observing. We are as much a part of those things as anything else. We're just one of many. And what I want to suggest then from the scientific perspective, we have looked at these things, we have looked at these principles and made these theories about how certain things that we're observing are to respond, in this environment, okay? We know that if there's a vacuum, there's going to be multi-possibilities, superpositions. But if there's no vacuum, the moment the vacuum is removed, there's simply one, this classical. So we have recognized how all these things that we have observed respond based on the environments that they're encased or released in. What I want to suggest, and they're unique in and of themselves. Because most of the things that our scientists are looking at, we see them. We see the evidence of them. We see the things that they are doing, but we don't know why or how, okay? And so recognize then, as we've been focusing on all these things we can see, we are not recognizing that we are as much a part of those things as those things that we are observing. So then how do we respond? And I don't mean our bodies, I mean the real part of us that's part of the elements, part of all these things out there. How do we respond in given situation and environments? And what I'm suggesting is that possibly when we're looking at Schrodinger's cat, possibly it was not the elements that changed the cat or that made it one particular classical cat, dead or alive, but it was our observation of it, okay? And so what I'm suggesting is we need to stretch beyond the science which has alienated the spirituality of all things, and really all spirituality is just recognizing that we are part of the expanse that we've been examining, okay? That's all spirituality is. Spirituality is simply who we really are. We are spirit. And that's just another name for being an invisible entity, okay? Just like all these other things that we've been observing. So what I'm suggesting is whole decoherence, and that is that the object adjusts from superposition to classical once elements touch it. What I'm suggesting the possibility is once the elements touch it, once we observe it. Which is it? Is it both? Did it require both? Did the element change to classical before we observed it? Or was our observation of it part of it, the reason why it turned to classical? And I'm suggesting is there are things that we pray for. There are things that we believe, okay? Now what I'm really not doing is tying anything to religion, okay? Again, I believe the religions were created by human beings, but what I'm suggesting is we are spiritual, okay? And all that spiritual means is we're invisible. And what does invisible mean? Invisible means that we are a part of this expanse. And so then what unique principles are there associated with who we really are? Is it really simply the elements that change this thing? Or was it our observation that changed this thing? I'm simply saying that this has to be considered. I heard a physicist say once that it was challenged if Newton, when that apple fell out of the tree, was it gravity that brought the apple down, or was it the apple falling from the tree which created gravity? Okay? So I just don't want to discount the possibility, and what I want to encourage is the belief in prayer. Now, I'm not saying any of the religion or any of the assumptions from the religion. I can say that, that let there be and it was and all this, but I could also just as well, and probably could see this entire thing that we call the universe, all that we are about, is contained in a petri dish by some other entity. How would we know? And so we are scratching the surfaces to what we're discovering and how it was done, but we're really still, even in the quantum field, at a very elementary stage, less than elementary stage. And I'm simply suggesting to the spiritual folks not to negate that and to embrace that as to a reason why you can believe that your prayers can be answered. I'm not saying praying to God, Allah, Yahweh, Vishnu, Krishna, whoever. I am simply saying the focus is on your belief. What is it you believe? And is what you believe will what you believe make manifest. Okay? And so what I'm suggesting is that when that box is opened, and Schroeder's cat is sitting there in one position or another, the classical position, that the reason is because of what the observer believed. And so we each have those boxes. And I'm speaking to a religious person who might be losing hope and not realizing why things aren't happening right, in their life. These things I'm praying for. I would suggest that it's because you don't believe. Even in the religious teachings, the nuggets, Jesus was always saying, do you believe this is going to happen? Do you believe that can happen? Even when things actually happened that were supernatural, Jesus would say, that's because you believed. So believing is what's important. Believing is going to change this from that. Believing is going to be what's changing dead to alive. Believing is going to be bringing to fruition what it is you're actually looking for. So when you open that box, what you're seeing is what you've believed for. So the question then isn't, I wonder what it's going to look like or what it's going to be. No, it's up to you. What do you believe? The last program we were talking about prayer and how to believe. And to not simply keep praying every day for the same thing, because that in itself is saying, I don't really believe it's happening. No, we want to pray. And I don't know who we're praying to, because the idea isn't who we're praying to. The idea is, are we believing? Okay? And so how do you increase that belief? As a human being, pray or affirm. But from then on, every day, and I would suggest at the same time every day, just to get in a real habit, be grateful that it has happened, even if you don't see it. Every day, be grateful that it's happened, even when you don't see it. Even when it's in that superposition, even when you don't see it, be grateful. And as you're grateful every day, your faith is beginning to build. In other words, your belief is beginning to become real and solid. So when that box opens, based on your belief is the result of what you're going to see. Is that cat going to be alive, or is that cat going to be dead? So what I'm suggesting today, from a spiritual perspective, in that we are residents of this expanse of quantum physics that we've been observing, that we are unique creatures. We are unique in that we are even moved to try to explore it, even that we are moved to try to understand. So we are different than most of the stuff that we see. And what I'm suggesting is that one of our unique characteristics is not that, oh, let me open the box and see what you got in there. No, what I'm suggesting to you as what you are in this expanse is that what you believe is going to manifest when that box opens. Now, on the other hand, without believing, we just live a happen chance life, which is what we mostly do anyway. we don't really plan. We don't really contemplate. We don't really figure. We just are like that little cat following that red dot around. What I'm suggesting is you can take control You don't have to be surprised. You don't have to be the victim, or the beneficiary of just what happened to happen that day and I just got lucky. You can make things happen in your life based on what you believe. What you believe. When that superposition manifests in the classical, what you're looking at is not just what happens to be. Oh, let me see what I got here. No, it's what you believed it to be. And that's the focus. Believe. Every day before that manifests, you be grateful, be thankful that it's done, thankful that it's done, thankful that it's done. And that is simply not stroking a deity's ego. No, it's shoring up your personal belief. So when that box opens, you are the one that has manifested that which you're looking at, and it's what you believed for. How's that? Decoherence. I mean, very interesting. Expressing that when the elements touch this thing, when the light touches things, when air, when every kind of thing that's not vacuumed, when everything touches this particular superposition, then the classical manifest. I'm suggesting that it's your belief that manifests what will be visible when you open that box.